if you liked it, then you should have put a ring on it. You're
So stupid.
You're listening to podcast.
It's so obvious, too. It's great. Oh,
I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and I've been taking a lot of ivermectin to get the worms out of my brain.
Are they ringworms?
Yeah. Ringworm is actually a fungus and not a worm,
Really?
believe it or not.
I'm Ben Sheets, regular contributor to Video Geek Monthly.
Nice. Deep, but good. Hi, I'm Cleveland Mosier, and we're well, guys. We like it when the ladder falls over. We're well, guys. We like the double-dunked horse. We're well, guys. The big chocolate double-dunked horse.
The Ringler.
Well,
The
guys,
Ringler was my backup.
the Ringler.
I swear to hand to God, I was gonna be being the Ringler because it's gonna be.
Well, comma, guys, we're back for part 2 of our 7-year...
The Rizzler's a Costco. Is it the Costco?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
that's right. Oh, fuck, yeah.
That's how we got to the Ringler.
The
Cleveland.
Ringler. So it's not how I got to the Ringler. I forgot that I just was thinking ring and then...
It's come full circle.
Like a well.
Like a... Yeah. Yeah. Well...
Well,
Well.
Well.
Welcome back to the podcast to, as I was saying, part 2 of our 7-year podiversary original versus remake special. If you're listening to this,
7 years.
original versus remake, 7 years, 7 pod
Horses.
horse casts.
7 years horse cast.
7 years horse cast.
Well, I think if there's ever a sign that it was time to retire, that's it.
7 years
there.
horse cast. Well, if you're listening to this, hopefully you listened to last week's episode, our discussion of Hideo Nakata's Ringu, the 1998 legendary, iconic J-horror classic, because this week we're talking about the 2002 American remake of Ringu, just entitled The Ring, directed by Gore Verbinski, who went on after this to do the smash hit Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl.
First one's a banger.
First one
Dude,
is
the
a
first
banger.
one is a fucking
honestly,
heater.
Probably
The
best movie.
second one's effects.
Still hold up very
hold
well.
up.
The effects, yeah.
Davy Jones looks great.
Oh,
Looks sick, yeah. Yeah, so remake time. We had talked a little bit about or last week. None of us have seen this in quite a while. I think you've seen it semi recently, Cleve. Isn't that what you were
yes,
saying?
I was pretty drunk. My
Okay.
memory of it was hazy, as I was, and but no, even still, and that was my first time seeing it. So this is my second. I was paying a little bit more attention. There was a better atmosphere for watching movies, and yeah, I think honestly, if anything, I feel worse about it. But we can carry on.
Yeah, well, this is the first time that I'd seen it since probably high school, maybe college. I can't remember. I had forgotten a lot of this movie.
What's your history with this movie? Was that high school or college the first time you'd seen it?
I think the first time I saw this movie, I probably was around like 12 or 13, maybe. It came out in 2002, so I would have been about 9 when it came out. So I definitely didn't see it right away. I had kind of a similar experience that you did, that you talked about on last week's episode, where, you know, some of my friends or like other kids in school, you know, whose parents were maybe a little bit more lax with letting them see horror movies early on, you know, talked about how scary it was. And again, like I talked about last week, before I saw this movie, I saw Scary Movie 3, which, you know, very, very much parodies this version of the story, especially. So it was weird watching it this time, how many sequences in this movie just triggered my memories of Scary Movie 3 rather than this movie. But what I want to do right off the bat is ask you, Ben. You've said for a long time that you think that this American remake is better than the original, and I know you hadn't seen it in a very long time, so coming off of a fresh rewatch, I gotta know, do you still feel that way?
I gotta know.
I actually love this movie.
Do you still?
I love this movie.
Okay.
I think my love of this movie has grown.
Really?
Since high
Okay.
school.
I cannot say that I agree with you on this one, but
I think it's brilliant, inspired work. It's incredibly atmospheric, first off. I'll just start
Sure.
with that. Like, it's very cinematic. I think the way it's shot is really brilliant and inspired. I think some of kind of the reflections of cultural anxieties at the time impact the story in interesting ways and kind of the take on the story in interesting ways. I think Gore Verbinski is an excellent director who really knows how to block scenes well. I think the cinematography, we talked, before about kind of the bluish look of this movie.
yeah.
Which in a lot of ways caused the trend of a lot of movies having that bluish, gross look in a lot of horror movies of this era. This was one of the first to do it. But I think it's really inspired in this movie.
Yeah, inspired by The Matrix.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, the Matrix came out in 99.
No, the reason it's inspired for this movie in particular is the color palette is very intentional. It's like a grayish blue of TV static. That kind of vibe, kind of reflecting the main focus of the film, is really interesting. And pairing it with, like, it being raining every day and kind of the
set in Seattle.
Yeah. Well,
Wet.
it just makes it feel all the more dreary.
It does
kind
that.
of- it drenches you in that kind of vibe and atmosphere really well.
I think you're right about there being a sense of intent behind it. For me, the style of this movie has not aged particularly well. I don't know if it's necessarily the film's fault. Like, I agree that it's kind of a precursor for the horror genre looking like this, but I do think, like, the kind of highly saturated, like, green and blue tint to this movie really does just feel a lot like The Matrix. But I don't know, man. It's like, especially like what we were joking about in like the fucking like funeral scene or like the reception after the funeral early on, where like because of how highly saturated things are, that like everybody looks like they've got like spray tans on their
What's so
face and everybody looks
interesting
orange.
about that is I looked into it a little bit, and this actually wasn't color graded strongly. This is in camera. They put filters and gels over a lot of lights and, even over the camera lens to get some of the effects.
In camera color grading.
But it is more of an intentional move than doing it in post, And I think it also comes down to kind of the cinematographer, right? Like, I was looking it up because I was curious if, this guy had just done this and then a lot of shit, it probably wouldn't be as intentional. It would be kind of a stumble upon kind of thing. But this guy has made a lot of really good movies. He did Underwater, which is a pod favorite, also very atmospheric.
Another very green and blue movie.
Yeah. And
I do love that movie, though.
But he also did, like, King of New York by Abel Ferrara and Deep Cover, which is one of my favorite Bill Duke movies. But yeah, like, I think there's intention behind it, and I think it's more than just kind of the imitators afterwards would be.
Yeah.
You look at something like Gothica or, like...
Gothica? The one with, what's her face? Is that a Halle Berry movie?
Yeah. And that one's, like, super blue.
Gothica.
Yeah, I agree with Ben on this point, actually. To some capacity. I guess I'm a little between the two of you, but overall, I will give the color correction of this film to Ben, minus the one aspect of the characters' faces looking just outright orange at times. It feels like they're painting with a limited palette, because this movie isn't exclusively green, it's also green and orange, or green-blue, right, kind of depending on the scene. And those are largely contrasting colors, so they kind of vibrate off of each other, and they look kind of nasty, but here intentionally, I would say so, for the most part. Again, except for when their faces are just kind of blown out. And the intent seems very clear in that. Also, I really love the use of orange lighting when the curse becomes, like, really strong. I do think that those scenes in particular, at least the interior shots, look quite good. I think especially when you would compare it to something else that was very highly color-corrected at the time that I hate, like the Dawn of the Dead remake, which is like, I think that's truly nasty.
Without
this
intention,
isn't
without intent, right?
This isn't quite that bad,
No.
but
It's still not great.
I think
and it's got some problems, but I'm okay with the intent.
I think it's a little bit
mentioned,
closer to that than
I
y'all
like
might
how
want
there's
to
like
admit.
pops of color throughout it. Like it is a very monochromatic, like blue kind of vibe movie. But then they'll have pops like the tree being
The tree
bright red,
I really like,
or
yeah.
like there'll be like yellow trucks in the background, and just something to accent it really nicely.
Yeah, like, and that's why, like I say, like I think the attempt is great. I like the idea of it, and this will nicely bring around to my next point, which is that I do agree that this movie left me feeling drenched. It left me feeling oversaturated. I think that it tries everything in the book to the point of, like, being a haunted house movie. I think it tries to do a scare every 6 minutes. I think it tries to really check every box that it possibly can to get the fears going and to maximize everything that was in the previous film, or in the original film. And I don't think that makes it better. I think that it's too much flavor. I think they took the original and they flavor blasted it, and I don't think it needed it to be. It was already like a delicious steak.
I think it's apples and oranges, though. Like, they're going for two very different things.
They are.
You know, like, this is a very much a cinematic Hollywood kind of style, you know?
Yeah.
And, like, I think...
Well, I mean, I think this is something that I was thinking about earlier today before we watched the movie, is that, like, I think that while we're talking about intention, there are, of course, exceptions to this, so I'm trying to not be too broad. But I think sort of inherently American remakes of foreign films are made first and foremost cynically. Doesn't mean there can't be quality, but in terms of, like, we're talking about like stated goals. Like, anytime you get an American remake of a foreign film, it's they're looking at something that is successful internationally, and 90% of the time they're not saying, I think that we could do something, we could bring our own flavor to this, or that we could do the same thing better. What they're thinking is, that's successful over there, so we're going to do our own version of it to make it more widely marketable to American audiences specifically.
A more
which is
accessible
like
product.
I think,
It's
you
taking
know,
a piece of art in front of
in
you,
like
more accessible
the
product.
impetus to get it funded. Sure, certainly. I think using the term cynical kind of strips the artistry of, like, this film a little bit.
I'm not talking about this film necessarily. It does have a lot of the same problems, and that's why I wanted to preface by saying that doesn't necessarily mean that there can't be quality American remakes. There certainly are.
Sure.
And I think in a lot of those cases, like, the artistry is sort of almost an afterthought. Like, you choose a director and they can bring their own spin to it. But the whole idea of getting it made is, we want to cash in on this thing that was successful, and dumb American audiences don't like reading subtitles, and they want to see faces that they recognize.
I mean, I think,
like,
that's a fair assessment for movies, especially today. I will say this is the first J-horror American kind of remake there was. You know, so it is kind of a shot in the dark in a way.
It is. And I think
the ones that came after it feel much more cynical than this one itself, because it is still a chance you're taking.
It's taking a risk, and risks can still be taken cynically. And I think that Gore Verbinski is sort of similar to M. Night Shyamalan. I think he's a very good director.
Well said.
I think he's made plenty of bad movies, but also like Gore Verbinski is the definition of like a studio journeyman. He's not an auteur by any means. He is a very skilled director who knows how to take what the studios want and make it successful. I mean, shit, look at fucking Pirates of the Caribbean. You know what I mean?
I would say he's an auteur, actually. I think the style is a different kind of style. It's a very studio style, but there are signature stylistic elements that carry through his work. From stuff like Mouse Hunt to Pirates of the Caribbean to this, kind of the way scenes are blocked, kind of the approach to shooting scenes is very similar in a lot of respects.
I mean, he has a style, but I mean, usually when we think of auteurs, we think of like writer-directors who have like a full creative control or creative vision for every aspect.
Kubrick is an auteur, and like he didn't write his movies.
He didn't like solely write his movies, but he was always involved in the writing process.
Editor's note: though Stanley Kubrick often adapted the work of other writers, he wrote the screenplays for 10 of his 13 feature films.
Yeah, I mean, especially like The Shining compared to The Shining, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's fair, but
Coppola didn't write his movies, like Godfather and Apocalypse Now.
He wrote Megalopolis. He wrote Megalopolis, though.
That's another.
And that's why I would call him an auteur.
I mean, I don't think we need to dicker too much about like what defines an auteur necessarily, but sort of my point in that is like Verbinski is a good director, but he is like a studio guy, and like I think that while this is as the first of the J-horror remakes, like, taking a shot in the dark, like, it's still, like, I do think it's still primarily, like, the studios being like, this has a chance to make us, like, gangbusters. This wasn't, like, Verbinski seeing Hideo Nakata's film and being like, ooh, I would love to remake that and put my own spin on it. That's a studio being
Before the original Ring movie came out, or Ringu, there was a very successful book that was a worldwide bestseller, So, like, it's something that they would probably go to adapt eventually, even if the film wasn't there.
Maybe.
Like,
maybe.
I don't know if I buy that argument here, to be honest. But, like, I think there is a lot of artistry at work here. And I think Gore Verbinski, I think he is very inspired in a lot of his choices. And that's why, even though, like, I agree in some senses that kind of profit-seeking motives, it's fucking movies. And it was incredibly successful, which caused all the movies down the line to be inspired by it.
Probably part of the big reason why a lot of the Japanese sequels got made, too, because it became such a hit in the U.S., and they brought on Nakata to direct the American sequel. In terms of what Verbinski's doing, I don't have a lot of problems. A lot of my problems with this movie, like, I do think it's ugly. I can't argue about the idea of intent. Like, I think you're right. Like, they obviously were going for something. I don't think it's aged well. I don't like the way it looks, but that doesn't take away from them trying to create a sense of atmosphere with that style. That's a matter of personal taste.
About it,
but
to me, is like I do agree, Cleve, with like this movie being very different, stylistically and kind of pacing wise, and even tonally at sometimes than the original. Like, I think this is like a masterclass in a sort of type of movie, right? This is one of the best PG-13 horror movies, and it's one of the best, like, mainstream Hollywood horror movies. I would put this up there with Sixth Sense and Signs, if not. I personally, I think this one's even better.
I disagree, but again, that's a matter of taste. I mean, I think that like this film like its cultural significance is undeniable.
Yeah.
But I think its greatest significance is its conceptual significance, which it can't claim.
Sure.
Like, I think that
Sure.
the so much of the marketing of this movie,
But it did-
and like the grassroots success of this film is like built on.
But it did
I
success.
think-
it
the
did.
virus
I think it
element,
can
which
claim
again
that.
is credit to the book. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
but-
like that's ludicrous. Like, look at The Thing, for example, right? Like, the original concept came from a 50s...
Who goes there?
Yeah, who goes there? What gets the credit is the 80s Thing because it tells that story very effectively. And I think here it's the same thing. Like, the
but-
story had been told before.
But the Thing tells a very like the John Carpenter Thing tells the story very differently than Who Goes There or the Howard Hawks Thing from Another World. Like John Carpenter's The Thing is truly like putting a different spin on the story. And I think that this remake, to keep using that, I think this remake very much puts its own stylistic spin on this story, but narratively it's almost the same, and the changes that it makes are, I think, dumbing down things that the first movie does. Like, it's interesting to me that you think that the first one, or that the original, is like boring, like largely boring, because I find myself in that position in this movie. I think that huge swaths of this movie are boring as dirt. Like, I don't think it tells the investigative aspects of the story nearly as interesting as the first one does. And like certain things that
I don't think
it
it builds
does,
tension either.
yeah, I don't think it builds tension particularly well either. I think that it, in certain instances, and you know, this is sort of like, you know, again, like I'm in your position from the last one, where like when this movie is on, I think it's on, but I also kind of think that it's on in very different ways.
Yeah.
Like the original, like, yeah, it's dry, but when it's on, I think it's legitimately unsettling and spooky. And in this movie, I don't think it's dry. In fact, it's very wet. But I do think large parts of it are boring. But when it's on in like a funny way. Like, I laughed really, really hard several times in this movie. And I don't think that those moments are played for comedy, but I do think they are really excellent, really excellent sequences.
Yeah, I don't think any of us can disagree that like we're all very glad this movie exists, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of ambivalent about its existence, but like I think it does do some things effectively, but like I do think it is like a lot of American remakes, kind of a dumbing down of the original, and I think that for me, honestly, watching this just made me appreciate the original even more after our last, and appreciate its subtlety.
And I wasn't expecting to feel that way coming into this one. If anything, I went into this like expecting a little validation or to be surprised by it, but no, I wish I did. But for me, so many of the problems do come up in the necessity to, as I've said, like have a scare, you know, every like 6 minutes or so, like, and to ramp it up.
Do you feel like it really does have
more?
Do you feel like it really does actually does have more like scares frequently? Because like I agree with most of what you're saying, but like I don't feel like this movie is like constantly cramming in scare. In fact, in terms of like a lot of especially American horror movies of this era, I think it's quite light on jump scares.
It's pretty
No, it
restrained.
doesn't have jump scares for sure, but like what I mean is like it maximalizes like so much. For instance, right, to jump ahead, but it's the best example I've got. To in the original,
like,
they
we've
find
already
out
been over the story.
Yeah,
in the
you're
last
right.
episode.
Thank God.
It's the
they
same.
find the well.
It's the same
under the house in the original, and they go into it and they spend their time and they deliberate trying to get the water up out of the well and to drain the well to find the girl inside of it.
Yeah.
In this one, they axe through the floor, pull off the side, the TV in the room starts leaking, nails are coming up out of the floor, it's all woo! And then
So
the girl
funny,
goes
dude.
down, the guy runs outside to try and help her, because the TV slides down to the center and like the TV knocks her in like a battering
That's
ram
where we're seeing all of
into
the
well.
all of the nails and the screws
Yeah,
coming out, like all of that. It's the metal
it's
supports
Looney
under the floor.
Tunes.
It's hilarious.
It's not scary. Like, come on, like get out of here. Compared to like the quiet tension of like the original.
Well, I mean,
film.
that's what I'm saying. It's like you're saying
Yeah.
that it's a scare every 6 minutes, and I don't agree with that.
Right,
because
but
it's
like what I'm saying is there's a full running sequence where we get to sit in this scene where we are and take in how scary this well sequence is. But here there's like constantly like again like the TV's falling down, the nails are coming up, like all these things are just like
Yeah.
bam 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 happening and like throughout the scene. And because it has to be more, the ferry, like they also like take the
we
ship
should
over.
we should not blow our
And
load on that scene.
There's
just
so many
yet.
scares.
We should not
Like,
blow our load on
but
that.
you see what I
scene
mean?
just yet.
Like that sequence doesn't have like a big scare in it. It's just dialogue in the original film.
Yeah, sure.
Like and I can go on. And of course too, while I'm talking about like just how flavor blasted this movie is, like how maximalist it is, which again, not necessarily a complaint. It is for me. I don't like it, but that's taste, and that's fine. But like I do think it's maximalist though.
Sure,
And
yeah.
It is.
I
Yeah.
agree.
good.
I like maximalism, though,
Of course,
especially
and
in
me
this
too.
movie
I
when
think-
done well.
Yeah, when it's
can
done
be
well.
incredible.
And I think there are many times in this movie where it isn't, but we'll get to that. But
I mean, hey, we just talked about how successful The Substance is as a maximalist
yes,
film a
of
few
course.
weeks ago.
Again,
you know?
intent is everything, and here I don't like how it's used, especially when compared to the original. The other one brings us back to the beginning, which is in the original film, these people see they're visited by some terrifying specter, and it is so terrifying that it either through a curse or just through sheer terror makes their hearts stop.
Yeah.
Right? And we see their corpses, and they're just people terrified in their last moments. Very simple, right? And here, in this film, we have the mother of the killed girl from the beginning speaking to our protagonist saying, oh yeah, the doctor said that her heart stopped. And then not too far later, we see the girl dead, and she looks like a fucking ghoul. Like, her mouth is wide open. She looks like she was put in an air fryer for like a few minutes. Like, she looks like a burn victim almost, and like
Spooky looking.
it's
It's a good effect.
it's
I think it's a
spooky
good
looking,
effect,
but it
yeah.
does not serve the narrative.
The struggle you're coming at it with is you're looking for realism. This movie is so heightened realism. You know, it's not realism at all, really. It's beyond and kind of over the topness.
That's true, but we also are like the crux of this discussion is in comparison to the original.
Well, and
we
also
talked
just
about
again
last
to the
week.
But again,
script inside of this movie.
Going
Like
for
I'm
something
comparing,
different with-
right?
I'm comparing
but
I'm comparing the thing that we see to the thing that they say in this movie on its own terms. Like is what I'm talking about, and they're two different things.
and we're also talking
like,
about what
just
works
have the
for-
lady say something else. Say, oh my god, they look like they were deep fried. They don't know what happened to
I
them.
mean, that's probably
like,
what
it
they
just-
are telling people at the wake is they had a heart failure, and it's not like
But that wasn't the wake. That was the mother like confiding in her and saying
Yeah,
like,
but-
"Hey, like I went to all these doctors and this is what they told me."
they're in grief. They're not going to know completely. I think it's a silly cinema cincy thing to complain about.
I just think that the script should speak to the visuals, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I think it like again on the film's own terms.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it's inconsistent, Cleve, but I also agree with Ben that like in terms of the grand scheme of the movie, like that's a pretty insignificant detail. Like I do think
It's really not that bad. I just think it's overbaked.
But no. I mean, to your point though, like what we are talking about too here is like obviously these films have different tones and in that sense are sort of going for different things, but we're also talking about like what works for us versus what doesn't. And I do think that like the effects of like on the faces of the people who are killed, like it's a good effect, like it's spooky.
Sure.
Like I remember seeing it young and like it scaring me. Like it's the type of visual that sticks in, especially in a young mind, and in that sense effective.
Yeah,
but
incredible for a PG-13.
sure,
Like,
yeah. It's it's spooky and they do it quick too. Like they don't linger on it too much. So it's like to that extent it is effective. Does it make as much sense as in the original? For me, no. For Cleve, obviously not. And I think that comes down to a matter of taste, but that is a good example of the sort of like this film's like maximalism versus the original's minimalism.
I think it's important to consider the audiences as well.
Totally.
The original Ringu is a R-rated movie, and it was for a very niche horror audience in Japan.
Sure.
Whereas this takes that and delivers that same story and concepts in audience-friendly PG-13 package.
In American audience-friendly PG-13 packages.
A dumber audience.
Dumber, greasier,
Yeah.
more, like, immediately engaging. Like, yeah.
I don't think it's a problem that it serves a different audience.
No, I don't think so either, but
I don't have a problem with the fact that American audiences are more stupid. Like but I do think it's like a statistical reality, right?
I mean,
and I think this
absolutely.
movie is catering to that, which
I
can
don't
be seen
think
as a
that's-
clever business decision.
Which, I mean,
That's
goes
a
back to
bad
my...
thing either, though.
I mean, I don't think we're saying it is either, but it is worth noting, especially when
because
we're talking
it's-
about it in, like...
Yeah, it's like the reality in front of us.
It's like not everything we're saying is like an
mean,
attack against the movie just because it doesn't work as well for us.
Yeah, I'm wary against dismissing it on those grounds alone rather than
No, we're not
saying
dis-
like
we're-
this is an effective movie.
Who's dismissing it?
Yeah, we're discussing it. We're the ones bringing it up.
Yeah.
I think it's the opposite of dismissing.
Something I did want to bring up is I was interested in who wrote this movie, which is a gentleman named Aaron Kruger, who seems to be similar to Verbinski, a kind of Hollywood journeyman screenwriter. I was just curious, go through some of his credits. It looks like his first quote-unquote big movie is he wrote Scream 3 in 2000. Also, some Ashton Kutcher spy thriller called Reindeer Games. But then he wrote this and the second American one. Do y'all remember that horror movie, The Skeleton Key, from 2005?
It was a
He wrote
YA
that.
novel first, I believe.
I never saw it.
I think the YA novel is different. Same
different
name.
thing. Just remember from the
He also wrote, and I don't know if y'all ever saw this. I saw this movie several times as a lad. The Brothers Grimm movie. You remember that? Where
I
they-
missed
Forgot
that
that
one.
movie even existed.
yeah,
I remember
with,
it coming
with
out, but
Matt,
I never
with
saw
Matt
it.
Damon
Never
and
saw it.
Heath Ledger.
Yeah,
where it's like the Brothers Grimm, but like their stories are real, basically. Like all the stuff they wrote.
It's really like the Brothers Edgy, right?
Oh yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's totally following off of that like Tim Burton Sleepy Hollow legacy.
Sure.
Definitely one of those movies. This guy wrote that. Skipping a couple things, he wrote Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, and also Transformers: Dark of the Moon, and also Transformers: Age of Extinction.
It makes sense that Michael Bay would work with
Totally.
a writer of The Ring. I
Totally.
mean, he has the Bruckheimer connection too, right? Like, Bruckheimer did Verbinski's movies after
Oh, yeah,
this,
sure.
and Michael Bay, Bruckheimer produces all of the Transformers and all of those movies. So.
Couple more that I want to touch on real quick. The Ghost in the Shell, that American remake, the ScarJo one, and then recently Tim Burton's Dumbo remake.
Oh, good.
But here is the really interesting one. One of these things is very much not like the others.
Okay.
His most recent screenplay credit. Top Gun Maverick.
Oh wow.
Well,
Okay.
all sins forgiven. All jumbo sins cast aside. Top Gun Maverick.
That was a roller coaster ride, honestly.
That's why I wanted to bring it up.
I'm glad you did.
That was fun.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
Holy fuck.
Valleys.
'Cause again, I'm sure at some point I found an excuse to say on the podcast, but like Top Gun Maverick, easily my favorite piece of military propaganda.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's it's such a good piece of propaganda. God damn, I love that
that
movie.
shit was awesome.
Fuck.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Gun Maverick.
Top Gun
rules.
Maverick is so goddamn
That's what was
good.
so fun. Like that's why I was like, okay, go through his
Ugh.
this dude's filmography, and it's like, oh man, a lot of dog shit, a bunch of the bad Transformers movies,
Yeah.
fucking Ashton Kutcher spy movie,
and the
fucking
script is good in Maverick.
Ghost in the
It's
Shell,
good.
and then boom, Top Gun
Yeah, man.
Maverick,
Just
crowning,
goes to show, you know?
crowning the cake.
Like,
you know,
just keep shooting.
dude. I mean, it's
you know?
like it's like fucking Craig Mazin doing all the fucking
Oh,
scary
yeah.
movie movies, and then coming out with Chernobyl just like out of nowhere. You know, everybody's got no matter how shitty your work is, everybody's
swinging.
got at least one golden egg in them.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because I think it's a good thing to mention on an anniversary episode too. Because I think of all the lessons I've learned this year, it's probably that to just keep encouraging people to keep swinging. You know,
Yeah, dude,
like again, Shyamalan. Like, goddamn, I've come full swing. You know, like again, I keep thinking about how great Trap was. Anyway,
Yeah,
just
dude.
Just wanted
Yeah.
to say that.
No, absolutely. There are very few artists out there who I would say like stop, please. You know, it's like even if you make a stinker, it's like, you know, keep fucking going. You know.
For you, it's probably Nicholas Winding Rain. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's put out a movie since
He's
the
put
Neon
out
Demon.
multiple TV shows.
Yeah, that's in a world that I'm not paying attention to.
So out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind. As long as he's not wasting Ryan Gosling's
You know,
time
he's a
anymore.
main character or a primary character in Death Stranding too.
And the first one, he's in the first one as
Yeah,
well.
but I think he's like a major player in it. More so than the first one.
Is he?
I thought he was kind of
don't play
minor.
him.
I don't know.
I
haven't
have,
played it.
Well, anyway, like,
I know
here.
he is friends with Kojima.
Yeah.
We just had a big shit fest. Ben, tell you what, I know this movie is more special to you, so why
Give you
don't
another chance to talk about something you like.
Talk about all the things you praise. We'll shut the fuck up for a little bit.
Sure.
Just afterwards, put on your raincoat though. But just take some time.
Okay.
Enjoy it.
I did remember the third point that I had forgotten earlier, and it is a bit of a stretch, but I think there's some legs to it that I want to expand on. I think there are some studied inspiration from other J-horror of the era in this. One of the primary interesting inspirations, I think, is Cure. I think there's some pulls from Cure in here that are really interesting.
All right, I'll hear you out.
Two main elements of it. One, the way water is shot in this movie. I think mainly towards that opening sequence where, you know, the girl is panicking and she goes upstairs and there's that pool of water and it's shot with kind of the light kind of bouncing on it in a almost hypnotic way, in like a way that felt like a minor nod in an interesting way to Cure. And
It's a
the
stretch,
other one,
but
the other one
I'll give it
is
to you.
a conceptual one, right? I think this is getting definitely into spoilers for this movie, but who
Sure.
cares?
Again, the story's the same.
But I think the ending of kind of talking about how Tamara is sort of still alive as
Samara?
kind of
Yeah, Samara.
Samara, yeah, Samara. I said Tamara.
I think in Scary
Samara.
Movie 3, she's called Tabitha. So.
Samara in this movie is sort of still alive as sort of a presence that lives in kind of the static, you know?
yeah,
in kind
sure.
of The
When she comes out of the TV, she's all staticky.
yeah, but like it's the idea that like there's something death that must be passed on upon.
Right.
Much in a,
She never
in-
sleeps.
In a curiously interesting, like, I don't want to say comparison to Cure, but kind of some synchronicity between that and like the killer and Cure being a vessel of death that's passed along essentially.
Yeah.
From victim to victim.
I mean, you're not wrong, but like that is also the whole point of the original film as well. So it's like I don't think that's something that's unique to this movie. Like that's in the Nakata film as well. Like the
Sure,
idea
sure.
of this ongoing curse that the only way to break it is to, or the only way to free yourself from it is to pass it along.
See, I think the interesting difference is at the very end seeing Samara speak about
on the tape from when she's at the psych hospital.
Yeah, and
that it'll like never end or whatever.
Yeah, and seeing kind of the boy talk about her never sleeping.
Yeah.
It kind of gets that supernatural killer vibe even more so than something where in Ringu it's more detached and more theoretical, I guess you could say. It's more detached from kind of
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think there's an argument for in Ringu it's showing not telling, and that in the more maximalist sense of the remake that it's just sort of like taking subtext and making it text. But I do, I think that like you do have a point about how if we're talking about like sort of horror villains or characters, your Freddy Kruegers, your Jasons or whatever, Samara in this does feel more like a character, like an actual entity, whereas Sadako in Ringu, I think there's something to be said that it's like it's maybe not necessarily like a conscious entity, but just sort of like
she's a force.
She's a force. Yeah. She's a force of rage and
the curse
and hatred that has to be carried on. That is not like a thinking, planning thing. And I think you're right. There is a difference there. Mm-hmm. I think again that comes down to a matter of taste, because I much prefer the more abstract concept of like not so much a ghost, but like a she's an embodiment of a curse.
About it here is this is mainly told for context for our listener. It's told through like an interview that was taped, and
when she's in the psych ward,
Samara is sitting in sort of a liminal cube of a room. And I love how the scene is shot, by the way.
Yes, no, it's good.
We view it through the TV, and like we have like a doctor at a desk, and we're kind of behind him, and like there's a little TV monitor with a close up of Samara on the side.
I thought that's cool.
And I loved how it was framed.
That you can see her sitting farther back in the room, like out of focus, and then
later it's in focus.
And then on the desk you have the smaller television that has the close up of her face.
Yeah, I just thought it was really brilliantly framed.
I like that. I like the way that's shot a lot. Mm-hmm.
But she talks about having the urge and wanting to kill, right?
Yeah.
Like I think again, like you were saying, I think you're totally on point in that like the original is kind of this supernatural force, where in this one it is a supernatural force in a respect, but it's one of sort of a more familiar killer.
Yeah, she feels more like a I mean slasher villain is the wrong
the
word,
vessel
but
for it is more human.
Well, I think actually, I'm glad you said the vessel. I want to compare the original Sadako to the Shape, right? Like we never see her
Michael
face.
Myers,
yeah, we never see her face. She's shrouded often, and
she's
made
even
to be
even in
this
the flashbacks,
entity that's greater than
that's a great comparison.
What is? Yeah, it's like and I think that this is much more.
See, that's why
that honestly kind of to pull back to our last week's episode, like that kind of goes back to my point that I was making about like me not fully buying the attempt to humanize her at the end, because for the entirety of the movie, like we never see her face. She is a force of evil and not so much like a person, not like a little girl. So when they try to be like, oh, she was just a little girl at the end, it's like, okay, I get what you're saying, but like it doesn't fully land for me. Like
this is and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've been thinking about this, and I think it is challenging ambiguity, and I think that that's important.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
And I think that is a common trait in like quality writing, where it forces the viewer to do a thinky, right? I appreciate that. And again, that's what makes it subtext, right? Is like there's a little bit of texture and grip for conversation and thought and, like exploration there. And it makes the thing feel like it's casting a larger shadow on the wall than the thing it actually is. And that's movies, man.
See, to me, I think you're totally on point comparing, Sadako to The Shape. I think that is very close and very accurate. I think there are different approaches, though. Like, I think this is more of, like, an approach that something like Longlegs or Kier takes, where the vessel is very human and has kind of human emotions and look and act like a person beyond the shape,
I hate the comparison, but you are right. Like to like the long legs comparison is I do see.
Well, it's interesting because in this movie, I feel like since they do show us more of like Samara and like who she was, and like we sort of get a little bit more into like her parents' abuse of her and stuff like that, it makes the attempt to humanize her like, I think, more effective in this movie. But the weird thing about that is that they do that and then they kind of rip the rug from under you by being like, no, psych, she's a stupid, nasty, evil little bitch all along. She never sleeps and she wants everybody to hurt and die.
I agree that, but I also
there's
like
something
that.
brilliant to it, though, because they introduced the backstory as this couple is infertile.
Right.
And one day they go off and mysteriously
They come back with a
one.
baby.
Yeah. And I think that is some ambiguity there, where it's like,
yeah, I appreciate that.
there
like,
could be
they...
like a deeper evil at bay.
Sure.
That, is their, I don't want to say justification, but motive for abuse and kind of hiding them away. And like,
well, the doctor says that everything was worse on the island when Samara was around. Yeah. Yeah, see, okay, well, that's a great segue because, like, I think, before I do segue, I will say I do sort of like that spooky ambiguity of, like, them going off, trying to have a baby for years, them going off and they have one. They say they adopted one, but there's not really, like, I sort of like the implication of that, but I do think... And this is getting into the horse suicide thing. Like, I do think that it's a little bit sort of undercut by not carrying over, like, the aspect of, like, the girl's mother being, like, a medium or, like, having powers or something like that, like they do in Ringu. Because, like, in Ringu, it's like the mother's like, yeah, she predicted this volcano eruption, and so, like, the village thought she was a witch, and she was bad luck because she was sitting out on the beach, like, whispering, speaking a non-human language to the sea.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so she had these powers and her daughter has the power to kill through her sheer force of will alone. And her rage carries on into this sort of like unfathomable, like inhuman curse. And it's like in this movie,
she's normal. She's a normal person.
Right.
And which I think makes it in a different way scary, because they stumbled upon something unknowable and they weren't supposed to have a kid, is what Brian Cox says.
Right.
You
right.
know? And I think there's something there in that, like, they, stumbled upon something very cosmic. In a way, that's why it's the mother that ends up killing Sandra.
Sure. But I think in this case, I think it's a little underbaked. I'm not saying like I need like a full backstory, but it's absent the details of like, the mother sitting on the beach and talking to the sea. It's like, all it needs is it needs a little bit more texture like that, other than just like, oh yeah, just one day they had a baby, and then all of the horses on their ranch died in a terrible horse drowning accident.
What I think is, like, I think the tape gives so much of this backstory organically.
Let's talk about
like, I think the original tape, is very minimalist in comparison. This is
totally.
You see the tape for the first time. I remember in high school, I owned the VHS copy of this movie.
Nice.
Which is an awesome artifact. Just
Totally. It's like the ideal format.
Yeah. I watched the tape, and at the very beginning of the Ring VHS tape that you buy, it has a copy of the Ring tape from the movie.
Oh, so that's the first thing that you see before the
yeah.
actual movie starts? That's cool.
It's really fun, and
so you
what I
start the
think-
movie feeling like you're cursed.
Yeah. Well, and it's so effective in this movie because without any context for any of the shots you see, it feels like some sort of weird avant-garde film.
Yeah, at least the character even does say in this movie is like, yeah, seems very student filmy because, oh boy, it sure does, but please continue.
But I think the charm of it, and I think what's really cool is, like, I think each shot has a story behind it that's kind of elaborated in the film that kind of gives that backstory texture.
Here's what I'll say: the original Ringu, it takes every frame or every shot from every one of those little bits, and it adds that same context to it. And so much of the film is them as detectives trying to hunt down the meaning of each of those shots, and every single one of them means something. Whereas in this movie, like, yes, they added in a whole bunch more shots, and they gave a lot of that more meaning. But also, like, what does upside down spinning chair mean? What does the centipede, like the centipede coming out from under the table is just she sees a centipede later on.
I mean, I think the idea is, like, they're all elements of Samara, essentially.
I mean, yes,
Kind
I do think, like, a big difference, though, and sort of what makes some of the investigation in this less interesting is that there's less about, like, analyzing the shots to figure out what they mean. Like, there is some of that, like them, like, stretching the frame to, like, see the lighthouse. Like,
I love
like
The Fly.
It's good.
We
The
can
Fly's
talk
good.
about
yeah,
that later.
I like The Fly a lot too. I think that's a cool touch in this one.
Agreed, that's-
But I think a lot of the stuff is like, yeah, the shots themselves do. Most of them do have, like, some sort of, like, literal meaning in the film, but it's less about, like, finding out what those are through investigation and more just, like, being at a place and, like, she looks up and sees the shutters on the window and then it'll do, like, a flash of the tape and it's like, oh, it's the same shutters. And it feels less like using the tape to solve the mystery and more like, as she's in the place, she's, like, putting the pieces together with the tape. It's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like
I don't mind that,
reverse
yeah.
engineering it.
See, what's cool is
It's fine.
I feel like even though the shots can be abstract and a little, they can be maximalist. Let's not mince words.
The upside down spinning chair is very goofy.
I feel like this is. I think this is supposed to feel like Samara imprinted onto the tape, essentially.
Sure.
And, like, what's brilliant about having even shots that aren't explained in it is, like, because we get, kind of that synchronicity with her history kind of shown throughout the film, you can kind of gather that those things are elements that we don't have time for in the 7 days, really.
Yeah, sure. I will say, like, there are a couple of, like, there are some striking images that even if they're not necessarily relevant, like directly relevant, or at least like cool. Like I like the match cut with like the shot of the maggots,
Yeah.
and then it cuts to just like dozens of people just sort of like crawling all over each other in
like-
the mud and the water.
yeah.
Like it's
That's a
very
great shot.
it's very evocative.
I love the shot of the little box with all the fingers in it.
Oh yeah. I mean,
What is that? What is that? How does that correlate?
We don't know, but again, like
Slipknot
the
music
implication,
video.
the implication is it's Samara imprinting herself onto the tape. So like, there's a story there that is beyond the scope of the film.
I just thought it was spooky.
Yeah,
It's
it also
spooky.
is spooky, which I like.
well, I while we were talking about the tape, like you mentioned The Fly, which I do think is cool. Is like there's a shot where it's like just like of the cliff side, and there's like a fly crawling on it, and it's like you can't tell if it's like a fly on the TV
Yeah.
or if it's like in the tape, like she tries to touch at one point and sees it's in the tape, but a couple of times like she's paused it and she's going like frame by frame, but like the fly is still
And
moving
it doesn't
even though
sync
it's
up with the pixels.
yeah.
And it twitches a little bit.
And then finally,
Okay.
like later, she tries to touch it again, and she like pulls it off the screen.
Yeah.
which is cool. I do like that. We keep talking about our protagonist.
Oh, Naomi Watts.
Naomi Watts.
I think she gives an incredible performance. in the movie.
Best thing about this movie, hands down,
She's
is
great.
Naomi Watts.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not an exaggeration to say that she probably would not have been the pick for this movie if not for the success of Mulholland Drive just a couple of years earlier.
Yeah.
Because sort of famously, she was struggling to find her footing as an actress in Hollywood until David Lynch gave her that shot in Mulholland Drive, and that kicked off her career. And this was like a year later.
This
would have
rocket fuel.
yeah. This would have been
right? Like,
yeah.
being a major Hollywood success.
Yeah,
Like-
but also at the same time, like, what a fucking wild juxtaposition going from David Lynch, Mulholland Drive, to Gore Verbinski, A Mayor Ring Make.
Honestly, I think
She's good in this.
Yeah, she's incredible
good.
in this.
Oh, yeah.
I think Naomi Watts has an incredible agent. You know, she's worked with David Lynch, Verbinski. She's worked with Michelle Haneke.
Yeah.
Just like a killer's row of big name directors.
She's great, man. I love Naomi Watts, and it's great seeing her in this. She's very good.
I think she's great. I think that the kid is great too. I
like the kid as well.
I think the kid is.
It's got a
and
very
this is
spooky look
This is the
to
thing.
it.
I will give the remake over the original. I don't think it's exclusively across the board. Better or worse, but the kid in this is given so much more texture, and I think it does.
Their
make it more compelling.
relationship, the mother
Yes.
and son relationship, is a little bit more fleshed out
It's
and
good,
interesting.
and
yes,
here I
yeah.
will praise the
I'll
writing
give it that too.
a little bit as well. Is I think the whole family dynamic, particularly on for them on paper and in execution, I think the husband is not good. I think
Oh,
that,
yeah, no.
I think he's a terrible actor, and it's a shame because again, especially compared to the original, where like the boyfriend's
Where
performance.
you got Hiroyuki Sanada.
It transcends all language. Like it's so rich with subtlety. Like it's a great performance. And this guy, I'm sorry, but like he's basically an underwear model. It's not,
Yeah.
And again,
No,
like
he's no
his
good.
his kill is like climaxes the film, and I think it strips it of a lot of its weight. But again, it's not going for weight. It's going for big scares. So whatever.
I think the emotional element of the mother-son relationship
Yeah.
is incredible, and
killer.
I think
Yeah, by all
it's another praise for the stronger emotional core in this movie than something more detached like Ringu.
Yeah.
Again, different
give it that.
approaches, but I think it does what it's trying to do with that very well. I will say with the husband, or the dude,
kid's father,
yeah, the kid's
yeah.
father. With
They
the kid's
treat
father,
that like it's a reveal in this. When
I know, 'cause it's
in
the
the
twist
original, when the original, it's like that character is introduced like, yeah, that's her ex-husband. It's
Yeah.
like it's the kid's
Yeah.
dad.
I will say I don't think he's a very good actor either. I think the scene after his death, when Naomi Watts sees the aftermath and gets freaked out, is very good.
Yeah, she's an incredible actor.
But I think what's there, the sequence right after she leaves the apartment is kind of the undercurrent of like dark comedy that this movie has. That I think is like good and funny in a very unsettling way. Is like she's crying, bawling, and she sees his new girlfriend get in the freight elevator
Yeah.
to go into the apartment, and
she just doesn't.
she just doesn't do anything.
Well,
Because after that, we have her like making the copy of the tape with her son, and her like using his hand to push it
yeah,
into
like they did in the original. Yeah.
into the VCR, so he can make sure that like he's the one
Yeah.
creating the copy, so they can pass it on. But to circle back to like the mother son relationship, because like I will say like that is one of the things that I can give this movie, like, I think the kid is like, in Ringu is like a good emotional center, you know, like we talked about that in last week's episode. But I do think that the relationship between him and Naomi Watts in this is interesting, because it's like she's obviously like so career focused that like she's hardly even around. That's why he was so close to his cousin who dies at the beginning, because she babysat him like 3 or 4 nights a week.
He's
because
very strong on his independence.
That's I've been racking my brain. It's in an episode that we talked about like sometime within the last few months, but I can't remember what it was, but I remember talking about how it's one of my favorite tropes in storytelling where there's like a little boy who acts like a grown man. It's like very like solemn and like very like responsible and independent, and it's like this movie is a great example of that. Like he's making himself breakfast, like she's trying to find her dress for the funeral and he's already like laid it out for her, and he's like straightening his tie in the mirror. he calls his mom by her first name.
It's great.
like I don't think he ever calls her mom in the whole movie. He's always calling her Rachel. It's like, you know, and I think that it does sort of like provide like a compelling foil to Samara and her parents, and seeing like how they neglected her and left her up in the they built her basically like a little dollhouse room in the top of the barn, and it's like she sees that parallel. It's like, oh, I'm leaving my son alone all the time, blah blah blah. So it's like I think
good
that
too how the
nice
dad
foil.
is
Yes,
a
that
foil
is interesting.
to Samara's dad
yeah
as well, and how like again on paper it in particular it's great. Like you know, he doesn't want to step in and be a dad. He was too young when she had him, and so he's sort of aloof. Like, and he never even told them.
Well, it's like the introduction to his character is like the little boy is like walking himself to school in the rain. He's got his umbrella and he's in his little outfit, and like he and the dad like bump into each other and they like make eye contact, and then we cut to, you know, the dad in the apartment with Naomi Watts, and like that's the first time we see him, and like I do think that is kind of like an interesting character
great.
introduction
Yeah,
to have
it's a
him
nice character
to like
moment.
run into his child on the street, and
He's
they're
afraid
like
of father.
they don't even like, you know, they don't acknowledge each other.
And you know, because he had a terrible dad.
Yeah.
as he says, and like
yeah, he says that. Like,
yeah, like, again,
I mean, okay, we don't need to see that. Like, I think in that's a case, saying it is enough.
no, but like, I think that at some point it would be good for him to have shown that to his son a little bit more.
I just don't think
like,
that I just don't think
actor
that the
didn't
dad
really buy
he's
it.
just not an interesting
Yeah.
character.
Yeah, like-
and a bad actor.
Yeah, because I just think like there could have been like a little bit more subtlety brought to that, like in the glances he shared with the boy and the rest. But I just don't think that was really brought to the table. But again, I like that but with not Sadako, Samara's dad, Brian Cox, the horse rancher, so as I like to call him, Brian Horse Cox.
God, dude, that was so. You said that during the movie, and I. It's very good.
Yeah.
Brian Cox
He's
is
a
great
horseman,
in this
so he's
movie.
Brian
Yeah.
Horse Cox.
He's a horse breeder.
He's a horse breeder, yeah. Horse Cox.
Or he
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
before the tragic horse drowning accident.
Yes, the horse Hey, look, again, once you say it, it kind of breaks the spell. But I think I did want to mention this earlier. I think the shot of the beached horses is, especially without context at the beginning, chilling. I think that's great.
Sure.
And I think that the
think
idea,
it's funny.
the tale of like a paddock of horses panicking and running out into the ocean and drowning is equally terrifying. It conjures imagery of kelpies. That's too deep of a read, but whatever. I like that. I think the whole thing is just wrecked with the
I'm sorry,
fair bit
it's
later.
funny. I don't know, like, maybe it's a
well,
maybe.
no, it's you break the spell when you call it like the mass horse drowning.
I think it was
and
funny.
I agree, it's funny.
I think it was funny before the ferry scene. We'll
That's
get to
fine.
the
I
ferry
think
scene
it's a
momentarily.
spooky image, like Cleve was saying, on the beaches, on the tape, at least.
Yeah.
Where you can make out that, like, it's some sort of animal dead on the beach.
I'll acknowledge that this is probably just like a personal problem, but I think horses are inherently funny creatures. So like I have a hard time finding them scary or spooky in
I
any
don't
like
find them funny.
I think they're such like big, dumb, absurd animals that just like I don't know, like this movie's focus like as like a central plot point instead of the volcano eruption in the original. The big tragedy of this one is some horses went and threw themselves into the sea, and I think that's really funny.
I think this is a great example of subjectivity.
Maybe it's just a me problem.
So yeah,
I'll acknowledge that.
I will acknowledge that I'm coming at this from the exact opposite perspective in terms of subjectivity. A few years ago, I had a friend who was a horse trainer, and I would go out to the paddocks with her pretty often and watch her train horses, and I would see and encounter all of the horses. And I got to be real, dog. Up close and in person, they're big and scary.
Yeah,
I think horses are big flesh tanks, and they're
I've ridden
terrifying.
horses. I've been around horses,
and I think that their stupidity makes them even more terrifying. Which I think is also Ben's argument for this movie. But
Nice.
I mean, cows can trample you too, just like a horse can.
That's
but
true.
like
Cows are funnier, though. Come on.
I don't think cows are any. I don't think cows are any.
this bears further discussion. Keep going.
I don't
Keep
think
digging.
cows are any funnier or less funny than horses. They're fucking barnyard animals. All barnyard animals are inherently
Horses
funny.
Where are the pig? Where do pigs
Horses
go
are
on the
like
horror
more
scale?
majestic than
Pigs
cows.
are also funny, but pigs do eat people, so
Pigs are
that
scarier?
So that adds a little bit of scary. Yeah,
I mean, pigs are scary. I will I will agree with that. But like scarier than horses?
yeah, dude.
I think there's a
man.
threshold
Pigs will
of
eat you like after
size
you're already
for-
dead. But fuck that.
A
That's
horse won't eat you at all,
I know that's good.
I think there's
so
a,
it's less scary than a pig.
I wanna-
No, a
I
horse
wanna
will
circle
kill you,
back to
though.
the
I don't
pig
give a shit if
here,
it eats you, but
because
it
I
kills
think
you.
there's
A pig will kill you, too.
threshold
Way
of like how
harder. I
big
can
the
take a
pig
pig.
has to be.
I can handle a pig. I can wrestle a pig, dog.
Dude,
they're pretty
pigs
big.
pigs get very large.
I have a chance with a pig. I
No,
don't have
you
a chance with a
don't.
horse.
No, you don't. I don't think you have a chance
There's
with a pig.
threshold that you have to meet between a pig being cute and funny to a pig being scary.
Sure.
And it's like at least 175 pounds, I think.
Yeah, sure.
This is some of the best dialogue we've ever had on this podcast. Like this rules.
Chicken's
I
not
agree, Ben.
not scary at all,
Chickens-
but also funny.
Yeah. Well, but see, chickens are really neat because I think that there's a subversion to the chickens where they are descendants of something utterly terrifying, and you
That's
can
all
see that
birds,
mirrored.
though.
Yeah, of course. But it's
But they're
really
like,
funny with
they're
chickens.
like actually scary birds out there,
I would-
like
That's true, there are.
Buzzards.
like buzzard, yeah, like
Buzzards are cool.
buzzards,
I
and
love
like
it.
they're cool, but they're
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 scary.
kind of
No, I
scary
agree.
looking. Like
Yeah.
those like big African vultures,
Condors?
like the condors. They're huge. Fucking eagles, like they're majestic, but like they'll
raptors.
fuck
I
you
think
up, man.
chickens
Big
is a
talons.
great example of like the perfect synthesis between scary and hilarious. Mainly chickens with their heads cut off,
There is something kind of spooky about that,
but also
yeah.
hilarious.
But
right?
it's also funny.
Well, the chicken with its head cut off is terrifying because we impose our own mortality.
It depends on whether it's funny or scary. Is pretty much like 1-to-1 related on whether you play yakety sax under it. Yes, yakety sax, chicken running around with its head cut off, funny. No yakety sax, kind of scary and morbid.
And on that note, I want to see a yakety sax edit of this fairy scene.
Let's talk
Yeah.
about the
Let's
fairy
talk about the
scene,
fucking
shall
fairy
we?
scene. It's
Let's
time.
talk
So
about the
good.
fairy
It's
scene.
our 7-year anniversary. We have earned this.
This is the best scene of the movie, and I think after we talk about the scene, we can rate it and be done. Because
I mean, Ben might have more things he wants to more flowers, but
we're already going pretty.
This is a great scene.
We're already going pretty long, but yeah. So as we've mentioned a little bit, the horse tragedy, the horse suicide, is like a big aspect of this film. Samura's mother and father, horse ranchers. Samura's evil power made the horses commit suicide. There's lots of horse imagery in the tape. Anyway, so Naomi Watts gets on the ferry to go to the island. And while she's on the ferry, she notices that there's a horse trailer on the ferry. And for some reason, she decides she wants to go over and pet the horse. And because she's cursed, the horse feels the spooky Samara vibes that has already killed many horses prior to this.
And again, you say that because it is explicitly told to us later, as opposed to it being up in the air as to whether or not that scared the horse, right? Maybe the horse just got spooked. We don't know. That's, to me, much more terrifying.
The horse
it is explicitly told to us the horse is spooked because she has the curse.
Yeah, the horse can
very
feel
literal.
the horse can feel the curse, and the horse knows that Samara hates horses, clearly.
Had to cover its bases. You have to.
And so the horse breaks out of the trailer and starts stampeding around the ferry, jumping on top of cars. Dude, seriously. And I love at one point, it's like, and I mean, the movie is treating it, like, very seriously. Like, it's,
I think there's a darkly comic element to it.
maybe, I think you might be projecting that. Like,
The
I
little
think
girl saying, "That's my horse."
that is very funny.
Very funny.
I do think
And
it's
I
very
think-
funny.
I think
That's
that
my
was
horse!
a cheeky little line.
Maybe. Anyway, the scene ends with the horse is like charging directly for Naomi Watts. At the last minute, she's backed up against the railing of the ferry, and she scrunches down, and the horse leaps over her and catches its leg on the railing as it's going over, and bonks itself into the sea, and then
It
gets
does a full front flip.
does a full front
Does
flip.
a full somersault back into the ship before hitting
It's
the water.
very, very funny. It's like a fucking.
It's so gratuitous.
It's like an
it's a Looney
old
Tune.
fashioned like fail comp kind of video. Like it's shot like that. There's like this wide shot of the horse like catching its foot on the railing, doing a front flip, banging into the side of the ferry, and then falling and getting sucked under the ferry, going through the propeller, and just like a big stream of blood coming out behind the boat. It's so fucking funny. We had to run it back 3 times to keep watching that shot. It is remarkable. Hands down my favorite part of this
What,
movie.
You're
what
not
I think
taking
is
that ferry in
funniest
real life.
about it to me is like it almost
That
feels
one?
like
Well,
a
not
play on expectations, because like you see the horse running towards the edge towards Naomi Watts, and you think she's either gonna go down with the horse or it's gonna make a big jump into the sea.
Yeah.
And you know
it's
instead of
going
a-
into the water.
Yeah,
but
instead of a big jump, it fails at the jump and
the
makes
fact
it all
that
the
it,
funnier.
the fact that it doesn't make it cleanly over the railing
Yeah,
is
yeah.
very, very, very
Incredible.
funny.
The last aside that I wanted to talk about
Okay.
is I wanted to talk about kind of the historical significance of this film.
Sure.
Because I think there's some interesting cultural anxieties that are being presented here. We talk a lot about, horror movies reflecting or kind of working in line with cultural anxieties. Of the time.
Absolutely.
And this movie was shot in late 2001 and released in 2002. This was right after
Post 9/11.
And so, everyone was glued to their TVs at all times. I think there's some synchronicity there between the anxieties they feel at home, in that, like, they are seeing horrific images of violence on their screens, and what they feel is a deep evil that is just beyond the pale of their screens.
Sure.
And like it syncs up with kind of the anxieties of this film, right? Like it's talking about a deep evil that is just behind the static. Just behind, your TV screen. In that kind of element, I think it was so successful at the time, partially because it played on those anxieties. Like this kind of tape concept,
Yeah.
it worked well in '98 for Japan, but I think it resonated so powerfully in 2002 because of like the cultural environment.
And the burgeoning age of the internet as well, where it's like we're not quite. When did YouTube launch?
2008,
2000
7.
Was it that late? Jeez. Okay, so we're not there quite yet, but like I think there is still, it's like, we see her doing some internet research in this one on, a primitive search engine. So it's like, yeah, I think there is something to that. I almost wish that they did a little bit more to kind of like tap into those themes. Like, I do think there's like one of the more interesting examples of that is when she's letting the boyfriend or ex-husband or whatever watch the tape, and she goes out on her balcony, and she's in like this high-rise complex, and she's looking across the way at all the apartments, and it's just, the camera is just panning from one to the next, and it's all just like people on their television.
Yeah, it's a
like
really
all
inspired
watching
shot. It reminded me a little bit of Rear Window.
Yeah, I think it does a good, and like I wish they pushed this just a little bit more, but I do think it's like a good kind of foreboding that like this is the age where this kind of curse can be so easily spread. Because it's like everybody's watching their TVs, like everybody is glued to their screens, and like this curse travels specifically through that medium. And I think, I do think Ringu in 98 is tapping into that same kind of thing as well. But by the time we get to, especially post 9/11 America,
the evil of American propaganda is spreading.
Sure. Yeah, sure. And I do like how at the end of this, as she's like holding her son's hand to have him copy the tape, he asks her, it's like, what's going to happen to us? She says, don't worry, you're going to be okay. He's like, what's going to happen to whoever we show the tape to? And she doesn't answer, and the last shot of the film is basically just like the last frames of the tape with the well and everything, and cuts to static. It's like, we are the ones who are being shown the tape. I like that. And it's cool to hear that on the VHS they play the actual tape first before the movie. Like, I think that's cool. It's
really
like
inspired choice.
You pop your VHS into your VCR, and you're like, the first thing you're doing before you watch this movie is you're being cursed. And I mean, obviously, it's hugely successful. Its cultural impact is undeniable, and it paved the way for the Grudge American remake, for the Pulse American remake, for all the sequels to both of those, and this.
A whole lot of copied tape.
A whole lot of copied tapes, yeah. A whole lot of copied tapes. And you know what? In some ways, this remake is it's a copy of that original. They're taking it and they're copying it, and just like when you copy a JPEG too many times, it's always going to be a little bit more fried every time. Like, it's always the quality.
Wait till you see Rings, dog.
When you copy it,
Rings.
When you copy it, the quality is always slightly worse.
Can I just say that there is a bit in Rings where they literally go to an art house video event?
Oh, good.
Like, they do like a student film thing with it. Like, I'll leave it at that. But like, yeah, Rings is wild.
I will never see it, probably.
Oh, I don't know.
Unless you pick it for the podcast, I have no other reason to watch it. Anyway, shall we rate? Yeah, boys. I'll start, since I sort of finished off there. Like I said, with the copy, you're getting the same thing, but just a little bit worse. I respect a lot of the things this film's trying to do. I don't think it's aged super well. I don't find it particularly scary. I think it's very funny at times, and largely boring. But hey, Naomi Watts is great, and from largely from a technical standpoint, it all works very well, so I can't give it too bad a score. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think this taps into, something deeply unsettling of, a TV with static, right? Like, the noisy emptiness.
Don't have that anymore. Now when a TV doesn't have a signal, it just says no signal.
No.
Or it has a little thing that bounces around like the DVD menu.
They should make a horror movie about that bouncing.
They should!
CRT TVs at the time and VCRs were so noisy at the time.
Yeah.
You know, you had this mechanical sound, which we didn't really talk about. The score is Hans Zimmer in this.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
That tracks.
which is, but like the
good.
tape score is really good. I think like the well soundscape where it's like weird, like frogs and cicadas chirping, very spooky. But like I think this movie really taps into kind of the spookiness of that stuff well, and it translates it to a PG-13 wide audience, and it takes a lot of these Ringu concepts and makes it much bigger. And I love it for that. I think it's the best of this kind of PG-13 mainstream horror movies. I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. I think
Jesus
it's really
Christ, all right.
incredible.
Clave?
Yeah, I think it's fair. Since we watched the original, the image of Sadako's single eye peering out behind the curtains of her hair has cropped up in my dreams as I fall asleep at night while I'm idly thinking. I feel like that film really did like kind of burn itself like into my mind.
How do you feel about Samara's grumpy face in this one when she kills a guy at the
No,
end?
I certainly don't. I
That
don't
was-
feel any way
that
in
was
any way
bad. I will
chilled.
give you that one.
In that same capacity. And so I will say I think there is plenty of merit to this movie that we discussed. But at the end of the day, I think much like American food, I gotta get my food metaphor in there, much like American food, this is injected with high fructose corn syrup and much less nutritional. I think that there's less maximalist things, substance to this film, whereas the substance is maximalist through a desire to be commentary on American maximalism and how vapid and stupid American audiences are. I think that this movie is just catering to that. So that is my final critique of The Ring, and I will give it a friendly 3. It's
A
fine.
friendly 3.
Fine
All
movie.
right.
And again, the horse going off the side of the boat is one of the goddamn
it's
funniest things. I've
hilarious.
ever
Oh my
seen.
God, dude.
It's great. It's great, and I give it marks for that. It's excellent.
Well, that will give The Ringmake an average of 3.5 out of 5. And which do you like better? Decide for yourself. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. Well, yeah, that was another successful original versus remake for our podiversary. And happy 8th year of the podcast, boys. Next week, we're going back to the theater. And, if you thought things have been a little dour, a little sour even, and you're wishing for the return of a reason to smile, we're giving it to you next week. Because it's time for Smile 2,
is it?
baby.
Fuck, yeah.
Yeah, Smile 2.
Folly adieu.
Smile 2, Folly Adieu. Yeah, we're going to, it's finally time. We're going to see Smile 2, and we will see, will we be smiling at the return of this cursed demon monster creature, or will we be frowning at this unnecessary sequel to a pretty decent B movie from a couple of years ago? Tune in to find out next week. Until then, if you like the show and you want to help us celebrate our podiversary 2 weeks in a row, leave us a 5-star rating and a review. Subscribe, share an episode, all of that shit. Head over to patreon.com/podpeoplepod if you like, and toss us a few bucks. You can get early episodes, you can get Discord access, and you join the honorary Podboy tier, you get to recommend movies for our Patreon pick episodes. And of course, as always, shout out to our lovely honorary pod boys, Sam, Zach, Micah, and Mitchell. We love y'all. Thank you for supporting the show, especially for our podiversary. And last but certainly not least, you can follow us at letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod, where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those reviews. I'm going to do something that I've never done before, and rather than making a recommendation this week, I am going to retract my recommendation from last week. Last week I recommended the new anime adaptation of Uzumaki on Adult Swim. At the time of recording, only the first episode had aired, so I'd only seen that. I hadn't seen the second episode yet, and apparently they switched animation studios to something cheaper after the first one, and the dip in quality is noticeable, and I can no longer in good conscience recommend the show. It's really sad. So on the tail end of that, I'll say, read the manga. It's good. I lent my copy to Cleve. You're reading it. You're
so
halfway
good,
through
dude.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, read it. That's my recommendation. Don't watch Uzumaki. Read Uzumaki.
I can only hope that episodes 3 and 4 are really good.
Are really good,
And
so then
you
I
have
can
to-
re-recommend
yeah.
it next week. Yeah.
Well, my recommendation is, I've been defending Gore Verbinski a lot on this podcast and his artistry. I want to recommend one of my childhood favorite movies that was directed by him. His first movie, it's a movie called Mouse Hunt. It stars Nathan Lane, and the whole premise is him and his brother inherit this huge mansion from their, relatives, and they're looking to make a lot of money selling it. The only problem is there's one mouse in the house, and it ruins their life in their quest to get rid of it.
So it's like the
it
Breaking
is-
Bad episode where there's the fly in the...
Except it's a live action Looney Tunes movie, essentially.
yeah.
They go hardcore into the Looney Tunes slapstick of it all. It is way over the top. It is way fun. It's super cinematic. One of my childhood favorites. Awesome movie.
And
And
it's-
holds up to this day.
And it's not the film adaptation of the board game Mousetrap, correct?
No.
It definitely sounds a lot like it.
I
which-
think there is one of those.
No, there is, and I remember it very vividly because there's a scene at the very beginning of Mousetrap where a lady barfs and there's a roach in her barf, and I'll never forget that.
That's Mouse Hunt.
That's Mouse Hunt? I thought that was Mousetrap. Oh, well, there you go. That's Mouse Hunt.
There
Yeah.
might not be a film adaptation
Yeah, I
of the
just
board game Mouse.
mentioned
I
that
might just
one.
be making
Yeah,
that up.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Yeah.
That's Mouse Hunt.
Yeah, Mouse
Yeah, well,
Hunt.
then I've seen it. Shit.
Incredible.
Yeah,
movie.
it took me a long time to watch it because I watched that opening sequence and I hated it so much I shut it off as a kid, and then I came back to it later and I really did like it. No, there's some great sequences in that movie. Yeah,
Very
I can't
fun.
confirm. I have seen
Nathan
it.
Lane stars in it. Great physical.
Well, I guess I can't
Nathan
confirm.
Lane,
I saw it when I was
yeah.
a child. I don't know how it's held up.
It holds up well. I've seen it in the past couple of years.
I see a good live action Looney Tune.
You got anything to recommend, Clave?
No, I recommend taking care of yourself. Sometimes it's good to just have the grilled chicken as opposed to the fried chicken. Sometimes, just it doesn't hurt to get a little bit better nutrition and a little less fat.
So what you're saying is watch Ringu instead of The Ring. Is
get
what
it.
you're
Yeah,
saying.
you get where I'm coming.
All
coming
right.
from. Yeah, get some like good
Practice
nutrition.
self-care and eat your vegetables, I
Yep.
guess.
That's my recommendation.
Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining us for our 7th podiversary. Here's to a great 8th year of the podcast. We hope you'll be along for the ride with us. Thanks for listening. And, yeah. Until next time, we'll ring ya.